Well, hello and welcome to the unofficial Unreal Engine podcast, where we talk about all things Unreal Engine and also palaces owned by commanders. We're your hosts. My name's Alex.
And I'm Jacob. Welcome to a very special episode. We're going to be, we got a lot to talk about.
So much. Endless amounts.
Yeah, we're coming back from an awesome Unreal Fest experience. We had a great time. I think we're excited to recap a lot of for you guys and tell you all about it if you didn't get a chance to make it, or if you didn't get to make it to one of the 100, 200, and how many ever sessions there were. I'm excited to chat about it.
It was a lot.
So
cool.
For those who don't know, or I guess maybe didn't see Alex, see or hear Alex on the last episode, and before I forget, I realized I forgot my opening line, Alex. You got to like, subscribe, rate, comment, do all those things.
I definitely forgot to ask people to do that last time.
Yeah, well, if you made it for Alex on the last episode, kind of talking about some tips for Unreal Fest, what it is, then you already know what's up. But if you've never heard of this thing and you're interested in Unreal Engine, Unreal Fest is an event each year. Well, in recent years, it's been each year. It hasn't always been that way. That is now hosted in New Orleans, and it's an awesome get-together of everything Unreal. It's a bit of a reunion for a bunch of us, but also a really awesome event where people are sharing the latest and the greatest. And so I had a great time this year.
I had a fantastic time. I think I learned some good lessons from last year. We were both talking about what worked and didn't about last Unreal Fest, and I took a lot of those lessons to heart. You want to know the biggest lesson I took away, Jacob?
What's that?
I decided not to go to any talks.
Yeah, you just made that decision right off the bat.
Yeah.
I don't want to see any outside information. I want to be completely unbiased as to the doings of the Unreal Engine community.
Exactly. What about you? What were some of the things you went in with a ready strategy for?
I have to say that last year I felt like I didn't make it to enough talks. And I also felt like I walked way too much getting from my hotel to the convention center. So at least I managed to solve those problems, but I can't speak for the rest. I did make it to a lot of sessions this year. I'm very excited to talk about a bunch of them. There's just so much awesome content. I was mentioning at the beginning, just the number of sessions was a little absurd. Every single slot had, I don't know, maybe 7-8 sessions going on at the same time. We were told that the conference was twice as big this year. A big part of that was the addition of the Unreal Engine, the Unreal Editor for Fortnite users that kind of joined the conference, which was pretty cool. A lot of things changed. I said last year I'm going to get to more sessions, and I think I managed it more or less this year. So that's always good.
How many do you think you made it to?
Probably around a dozen. Each day I would guess there were probably 5 or 6 slots that you could make it to. And yeah, I think I made it to about a dozen, all in all.
Cool. I saw a little bit of Snoop Dogg and both sessions I was in, and then nothing else.
Just throwing out Snoop Dogg already. Wow, like that was.
I know we're giving a bit of a tease. Spoiler. For anyone that doesn't know, Snoop Dogg was there and his son. It was nuts. It was such a smoky fireside chat.
All right, so let's play this back from the beginning again for those folks who didn't get to make it. We get there first day. We have a nice opening mixer in this kind of larger space. Everyone's getting to know each other. Anything of note just that first day for you, Alan?
something that started right away from the opening mixer and then just kind of continued the entire week was every time I had a plan of going from point A to point B, I was interrupted by me either seeing someone I was really excited to talk to or someone seeing me and seeming, reasonably excited to talk to me as well. So constantly like, I'm going that way. Oh, hey, it's you. How are things? That was amazing. That thing you posted on the YouTubes or whatever. And the community side of it was really a huge highlight of me, just getting to see all these amazing people. And also, the thing that struck me during the opening mixer was getting carded and realizing, I don't think that happened last year. Huh. I wonder why they're carding us this year. Jacob, did you have any idea why they were carding us?
I couldn't imagine. I felt like maybe the venue just cracked down on it, but yeah, I think you're right. I was never carded last year.
The reason I figured this out pretty quick, the reason
Oh,
they were
that's right.
carding
That's
us,
right. Yeah.
UEFN, there were under 21s there. There were 20-year-olds who, several of whom I met, running very successful companies, building their worlds in UEFN and making more money than you would think.
Yeah. Yeah. There was a bunch of that. I guess there. Yeah, it felt like a much more diverse community rather than a lot of the. Don't get me wrong. There are a lot of faces that I've seen before, but certainly it looked a lot different this year, and I think all in all, everyone was excited about it. And I can confirm that Alex was legitimately stopped every like 10 feet. And we'll get into this. We lost some members of the Unreal Engine community recently. I feel like that's only improved your niche celebrity, Alex, in a way that was apparent this year.
So going into Unreal Fest this year, it did seem like the layoffs, which we haven't really talked about yet, might put a bit of a damper over the festivities. How did you feel about that going into the day, Jacob?
Going into it, it was pretty unclear how everyone was going to react, right? I think there were some people who this wasn't quite as close to the chest, didn't know folks inside of Epic, and it was just kind of like, oh, what's this going on at Epic? Like, it's kind of weird. Like, do I still want to be part of Unreal Engine if they're going to be, struggling or whatever, right? But for me, it was more that I didn't really know who had been laid off.
Yeah.
And so going into it, it was a big question mark, like who's going to be there from Epic and who's not. And there were a lot of surprises throughout the week of people that I was like, oh, well, I just realized this person's not here, and oh yeah, that person got let go. So yeah, coming into it, I was just kind of interested to see how that would play out. But yeah, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I felt the same as you. Like it felt a little bit. I felt trepidatious going in. I wasn't sure if it felt right to be as celebratory as last year. And all week, at least a few times a day, I was realizing like, oh my God, I can't believe so and so got let go. And some of those people were huge heavy hitters at Epic Games who had a huge impact on the community, the engine, people who I spent time with last year at Unreal Fest, some people who I knew were meant to be speakers at this Unreal Fest, and
Yeah.
either their talks were canceled or they were replaced with something else. But I guess it's worth mentioning. I didn't see this because I slept in, but the morning of the opening session and the live stream, it seemed like, and were you there, Jacob,
Yeah, I
for
was.
Tim Sweeney
I was.
coming out? Yeah. So what was it like for Tim Sweeney to come out on stage? No music, no razzle dazzle,
Yeah.
just to kind of start on that somber moment.
To be clear, he was not listed anywhere in the program, right?
Yeah.
So if you looked at the session details and took a peek at who was going to be talking, Tim Sweeney was not there. So none of us really had any idea or thought that he'd be there. He wasn't at Unreal Fest last year, as far as we know. He was at GDC, but was he going to show up? And I don't think anyone was actually expecting him to address it. The typical CEO playbook today in tech is not really to address those things head on. So, we get in, the session starts, they play, opening music is playing. We're like, they're trying to get everyone kind of ready and excited. And then it all shuts off. The screen's just black with Epic logo on it. And Tim Sweeney comes out and is like, I'd like to talk about the layoffs and address this from the start. I think, from where I was sitting, everyone was, yes, a little shocked that he had done that, but everyone was paying very close attention to what he was saying. And I don't think anyone that I spoke to felt like they walked away from that feeling like he was disingenuous or that he had said the wrong things, quote unquote. So I would say overall, like, my personal opinion is that's a pretty tough spot to be in. He felt more or less honest about the situation, though I'm sure that, you know, in the end, there were a lot of people that were involved in the layoffs that probably had a lot of responsibility for the kind of experience that employees got during the layoffs. A lot of people were just surprised you're fired, or like, hey, we're forgotten about it, and didn't know until many days after the rest of the layoffs that they had been fired. Right, like there's a lot of process there clearly that Tim Sweeney is not directly responsible for, but had a big impact on a lot of the folks that I know that were talking on Twitter about it. But he got up there and he addressed it, and he said, usually this is about celebration, but this year we're, kind of in the shadow of this thing that kind of had to happen. We needed to stabilize the company and all that. So, were you watching from the live stream?
No, I literally just watched the talk he gave last night because they posted the opening session on YouTube. Because they didn't make that part of the live stream. They started the live stream off with the proper like, here we are at Unreal Fest, and for a while it seemed like Tim Sweeney speaking was only going to be something that people at Unreal Fest got to hear, which seemed like it was going to be a bit of a problem because he's a little bit of a mumbler. Like, he's not a super articulate public speaker, and some of the things he said got taken like very out of context or soundbitey, or people thought they heard him say things that he didn't. And especially when he started talking about like new fees for non-gaming markets, some people, I think, completely overreacted to what seemed to me to be a very reasonable thing. As someone who has been using Unreal Engine for free for, over 8 years now, like, yes, Unreal Engine deserves to have some of the money my company makes.
Yeah, I think, yeah. So if I were to break this down for like folks who weren't there or kind of didn't see it or aren't going to watch it, it would be, he got up, he said, Epic Games has had ups and downs. We've grown from 500 people to 5,000 people, and we're just paying the consequences of growing a little bit too fast and realizing that we need to conserve our finances more and make more sound financial decisions. Essentially, like they had a money printer. It was Fortnite. It's slowing down a little bit, so they have to kind of make sure that they are financially stable, so that they can continue to build the things that they're building and continue to support communities. And then he says, okay, so, well, we laid people off, where we consolidated. I don't know. He didn't really say this, but he kind of mentioned offhand, like, oh, well, we consolidated some of our acquisitions, stuff like that. And then, we're going to be moving Unreal Engine to a seat-based license for non-gaming use cases. And the funny thing is, like, this is coming right off of the Unity kind of disaster, I feel like it's fair to say, which we spoke about on a few episodes back. And I was, when he said that, like, personally, it didn't offend me that much, but I was expecting a pretty big reaction from the crowd. Right, because Unreal Fest, so like Unreal Fest last year was about 50% games and 50%, other use cases. Right, I think the graphic that they brought up was maybe actually closer to 60% games. But anyways, right, this year, I mean, it seems like maybe it was 30-40% UEFN, and then I would guess the rest was a pretty similar split, right, between non-gaming and gaming. And so I was expecting a fairly sizable reaction, and there really wasn't any. I think most of the people who this would impact were like, yeah, okay, we kind of saw this coming, like we're getting so much for free. What could we like? It was actually very surprising for me that no one really reacted to that, and everyone seemed pretty okay with it overall.
Yeah, it's all about the delivery and, leveling with people, warning people, saying right up front, like, this isn't all worked out yet. We just wanted to let you know this is going to happen. And having it come from Tim Sweeney. One thing I guess also worth mentioning is John Riccatello is out of as
Yeah.
Unity CEO, and that feels like a good decision. One thing I've always enjoyed about Epic Games is the fact that it continues to be run by the person who started it, and Unity's kind of lost a little bit of that. In fact, I asked several people at Unreal Fest, like, can you tell me who created Unity, who actually wrote the original source code or anything like that? And not a single person could tell me.
No.
Yeah.
Well, as far as I know, I actually really don't know the backstory of Unity. Right. The backstory of Unreal, I think, has more interest because of kind of the role it played in very early gaming. But yeah, I really don't know the backstory of Unity. If someone out there is a Unity fanatic that knows this backstory, come on the podcast, talk to us about the history of Unity.
Yeah. I think we're going to have Dilmer from LearnXR on the podcast soon, and I bet he could tell us.
All right. Well, I'll do a short summary of Unreal now that we talking
Yeah,
about it.
sure.
But Unreal started in, man. Let me find an actual date before I just make something up.
Well, while you're finding some info, one other thing I just want to say about the layoffs and Tim Sweeney and everything there. First of all, the thing I kept thinking to myself was like, I wish the layoffs had just had a little more of a 2 weeks notice kind of vibe to it, because I think the biggest problem with them was they were so sudden, and that everyone just seemed very taken aback by them, especially right ahead of Unreal Fest. And I thought, well, gee, wouldn't it have been nice if that happened at least after Unreal Fest? But then something I heard a few people say is like, well, then the problem is you have a bunch of people like bonding with the community as Epic Games employees, and then they're no longer Epic Games employees. And my instinct is still that there would have been an elegant way to just make that known to everyone, to like still let Unreal Engine employees, even the ones who are going to be laid off from Epic Games, be at Unreal Fest if they were already going to be. But also be kind of helpful in that transition. They're there to fulfill whatever duties they had, running different lounges and manning different booths and giving different talks, but also being clear to people like, I'm not going to be at Epic Games anymore. Here's who's going to be taking over my responsibilities. Please stay in touch. I'm on LinkedIn. Because the fact of the matter is 6 months of severance, pretty generous, like
Yeah, I was
especially with
about to
health insurance
say.
and all that. I don't think there would have been a lot of bad blood from the outgoing employees if they were given enough warning, and I feel like 95% of them still would have been good ambassadors, even with the knowledge that this was going to be their last Unreal Fest as Epic Games employees.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can see it a couple ways. One is that they did this right at the end of the third quarter,
Yeah.
third financial quarter.
Fiscal.
So my understanding is that they had investments or loans that they needed to refinance as a result of the financial situation, and so they had to prove that they were on a positive income track at as soon as possible. And I guess it got more urgent than they expected.
Yeah.
Is what I would guess. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Like the severance they gave, as far as I understand, everyone 6 months of severance, which is insane. Full pay, like that's a pretty nice vacation. And he made very clear on stage, like, we only laid off good people because we only hired good people, which is not a very nice thing to say if you're Tim Sweeney, because he didn't have to say that, right? Like it's off his hands. But so yeah, I can see it that way. I can see it the way you're looking at it too, where, well, if you're going to give them 6 months severance, why not give them 3 months heads up and 3 months severance, and let them live through Unreal Fest and finish up their work and whatever else they need to do. And if anyone wants to leave, ahead of time, give them that option. And yeah, maybe they could have handled it, but maybe that would have had a different financial impact. And I don't know. It seems like a pretty sticky situation, and they're a private company, so they don't really have to disclose, their earnings, and they don't have to really show us inside the current unless they want to.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a bit of a shame, but I do feel like after the initial shock has worn off, people will be generally okay with most of the outcomes that were handed to them based on what I heard.
Yeah. And knowing some of the people who were laid off, who are, again, super talented, I'm sure some of that 6 month severance is going to go toward funding some really exciting new projects, startups, things that some of those employees have had in their back pocket for a long time that now they kind of finally have the time and financial freedom to make real. So I'm really looking forward to all that.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, 100%.
You're going to tell us a brief history of Unreal
Yeah,
Engine.
yeah. Well, okay. So only to garner a cult of Unreal, right? Um, so apparently 1991 is the founding date, and Tim Sweeney founds Epic Games, and they're working. The first game they ever work on is Unreal Tournament. And as part of that game, so this is like the same era as Doom and a bunch of
Castlevania.
classic, essentially the very origins of 3D games is what this is. It's a little later than most of those games, but still very early on. And in the process of developing Unreal Tournament, they realized they had something in the engine that other developers wanted. They're like, oh well, I want to make games. Can you give us, your source code? And whereas at that time most people would say hell no, like that's our intellectual property. They said, oh well, this is a business. So as far as I'm aware, they decided to out the gate give people licenses to use the software, and Unreal Tournament goes by, Unreal Tournament 2, and all of a sudden the engine starts making a lot more money than those games. Past that, they had Gears of War was their next really big successful franchise. There's probably one I'm missing in there.
Unreal Tournament 3.
Yeah. Gears of War, and then more or less Fortnite, right? Which is, 30 years of history, don't get me wrong, but the fact that Unreal Engine as a piece of software has remained so cutting edge is pretty impressive, given that it's, 30-ish years old. But certainly it's changed a whole lot. I'm sure there's very little code that is still there. But yeah, that's the brief history. And there's a lot of really interesting side stories of like Tim Sweeney writing manifestos about open or shared, source code, and giving people perpetual licenses, and like saying, yeah, this is yours. Go make it. So yeah, I would be very interested to hear the story of Unity, but we're getting sidetracked, or I'm getting sidetracked, I should say.
One final thing I'll say about Tim Sweeney before we dive into Unreal Fest proper. I saw him a lot around the conference center. Even when you and I were together, we saw him a few times. I never spoke to him, but I was just impressed by the fact that he had no entourage. He didn't have bodyguards. He didn't have handlers. He was just a guy in the pink Unreal Fest staff shirt, wandering around, saying hi to people, taking pictures with anyone who wanted to. And, to the outside observer, some random Hilton employee or something like that, he probably just looked like, a very friendly old custodian or something who had been working at this company for a while. Like, no one would have thought, like, that's the guy who runs this enormous business.
Yeah, no. So, yeah, that first night that we were there, we were just standing, chatting, and all of a sudden I see him and a group of, I don't know, VPs or something walk in to what I later learned was the stage, probably to do a mic check or, to get shown the stage and what they would be doing or whatever. But he just walks by, and it shocked me because he walked through this entire room full of Unreal Engine nerds, and he didn't get stopped once. Everyone was super respectful. A lot of people didn't even realize it was him because he
Sure.
doesn't dress any differently, right? He doesn't look like he is a celebrity tech CEO, like not at all. So yeah, I was very, a little shocked because he just walked in, walked out, and it seemed like nothing had phased him, and no
Yeah.
one else felt like bothering him at all. Alex and I
Cool.
sadly didn't get a picture with Tim Sweeney, even though we
So
had multiple
close.
opportunities. Yeah, and the very last day we saw him in our hotel, and someone else was taking a photo, and we're like, we should go try and get a photo. And then right as we got there, he started walking out. We felt
And
too
he was
bad to chase
walking
him
at
down.
like just brisk enough of a pace that it felt like he maybe had to be somewhere. If he was
Yeah,
walking like 2 miles an hour slower, I wouldn't have felt bad about being like, "Oh, hey Tim, do you have a second?" But not at that speed.
nah, I didn't feel like it. Anyways, all right.
Yeah. All right, let's get into the fest proper.
So the opening keynote, Tim Sweeney gets up there, he addresses the room, kind of puts this aside and says, "Hey, we know this happened, but this week is about celebrating. It's about you guys, right?" Which is the right message. Is like, yes, Epic is hurting a little bit, but we do the things we do because we want to help you guys with what you do. So this is about you, right? Like, very, I think a very good message overall. But okay, so we get into the keynote, and essentially there's no big announcements this year. Tim Sweeney kind of dropped the bomb with the like licensed seats right at the beginning. But more or less it was a lot of new faces on the stage because even a lot of the very high up leadership was replaced. The biggest being the VP of Unreal, I guess, was let
Bill
go.
Clifford.
Who?
Oh, sorry, who?
The former VP of Unreal. Um, I can't even remember his name.
So this is who Bill Clifford replaced?
Correct. Mark
Oh.
Pettit. Yeah. Or no, 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 no. That's not right. That's not right. Okay. So yeah, no, that it was. So Mark Pettit was general manager for Unreal and VP Unreal Engine ecosystem.
And now he's listed as a
And
consultant.
now
What?
he's a consultant. He was let
That's
go.
crazy.
So that's so yes, the layoffs went pretty high up.
Yeah, I've known
Um,
Mark Petit for years. When he still was at a much lower level at Unreal, and
yeah.
crazy.
So
I mean, he was posting about it a lot on YouTube, so I don't think that on sorry LinkedIn. I don't think there's any bad blood there, but fascinating.
yeah, maybe he decided it was time to go, or he disagreed with the decision, or who
Mm.
knows. I have no clue. But new new faces. So a lot of that. We heard a lot about Unreal Engine for Fortnite. They dropped the bomb that Snoop Dogg was going to be there, and everyone was pretty excited about that. And then someone got up, their mic died, and I have to run for a call. So I didn't see the rest. Alex, do you have any context to add there?
Well, you said there weren't any big announcements, and I think for the most part that's true. Even things that I think a lot of us were expecting, like, when is Fab coming to the Unreal Engine editor? They kind of shuffled off into being like, now it's going to be sometime in 2024. But I did like that they revealed this little thing that they call oh my God, that is so artifacty. I'm trying to share my screen.
Yeah.
The Unreal Engine public roadmap,
Uh,
which
yeah.
we've looked at this many times in the past, but now there's a new tab called Forward Looking. And the Forward Looking roadmap is really just all the things that are being worked on that are going to potentially come at some point, but we don't quite know when. And by the way, dear listeners, if any of you remember a couple episodes ago when Jacob and I were really excited about something, and then there was a big empty spot for a bit. Oh, thank you, Jacob. There was a big empty spot inside the podcast. That was because we had seen something on the Unreal Engine 5.3 roadmap that I was told by Epic was put there by accident, and it was supposed to go into this forward-looking roadmap, and that was the desktop renderer on mobile devices thing that basically says Lumen Nanite coming to Vulkan. Very exciting. And we were so happy about that, but then we're told, like, don't talk about that till after Unreal Fest.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and there's a lot of really cool stuff in here, for the record. A lot of stuff that I expected, some that I definitely did not. So path tracing improvements, I won't go there. A lot of the interesting stuff was actually for me, and I heard a lot about this at the conference about a lot of the changes to running editor, either for teams in a collaborative sense or in new environments like the cloud. Dependency tracking, that's it. If you work in infrastructure or you work in trying to orchestrate the engine for tasks outside of games, this is one of the big things that Unreal Engine was kind of missing.
Hey, Jacob,
Yeah.
talk about these for a second. I really need a glass of water, so just keep
All
going.
right, I
and
can
I'll be
keep
right
going
back.
for a long time. So
Great.
we're
keep going.
good.
Keep going.
All right, so a bunch of other very interesting infrastructure, kind of like good to haves that probably people would overlook. One of the big ones is virtual assets. So if you're a studio and you have 30, 40, 50 artists, programmers, or whoever who are working on an engine build, let's say particularly you're a programmer, you might not need actually all of the assets that come with a project, um, just to do your job. So let's say you're a programmer, you're working on a specific feature, and you're going to be inside of your code editor the majority of the day. But in order to work on the project, to compile it and to test it, you need to have, the full project file, essentially. So runtime virtual assets, it takes essentially the headers from UAssets. So it says, here's what I am, here's where I am in the scene, here's all the things I do, and even has the actual data to present to the engine, so the engine can render it. However, all the bulk data, so meaning like the actual assets that you uploaded. So let's say you upload an FBX. The U asset is a separate file. It essentially gets converted, right? It's going to leave all that bulk data, all of the imports and everything that makes the project files kind of blow up. It's going to leave that somewhere else in some distributed shared place so that all 50 employees can all access it, but you're only going to access it when you need it. And so for folks who have dealt with the engine when it comes to things like Perforce or collaborating, like this is a big deal because it really is just going to make such a big difference in the lives of people who are using the engine on a day-to-day basis for larger productions. There's a lot of talk. I shouldn't say a lot of talk. There is a lot of stuff here about kind of how to work with the engine in terms of building the engine and a lot of these tasks that, again, if you use the engine a lot, these are some of the things that really affect your day-to-day quite a lot. And Alex, we'll talk about this a little later. One of the really great talks that I got to this year was from TensorWorks, and they had a really awesome few slides about the work they're doing in virtualizing Windows on Linux using Wine and Proton. And one of the really cool use cases that they showed was building a Windows build of the engine. So like building DirectX, engine versions inside of Linux, which is like
that's cool.
the holy grail if you're a nerd like me and you think about things like, how am I going to build 1,000 versions of the engine at once? Well, that's not really all that practical inside of Windows, but if you were able to virtualize inside of Linux, it just opens the door for so much. So there's a lot of really cool stuff like that going on in the world of Unreal. And then, yeah, I mean, there's really just so much here. Alex, what stood out to you in
Oh, I
this
can't even
forward
remember.
looking.
There, I mean, there's a ton of stuff there. Definitely the biggest one to me is knowing that Lumen and Nanite will be coming to, yeah, mobile devices, especially maybe things like, a Quest 3, which just came out today. Fun fact.
Yeah. Did you get one?
I did. And not to go down a VR tangent, but this is the first headset that I've always received every new VR headset like day one, and this is the first time where I still received it day one. Haven't opened it yet. Just like it wasn't
Wow.
the most important thing on my list today, and I wasn't as excited about this as all the previous headsets. So I'll check it out when I have time.
That's a bad signal, I gotta say.
Maybe.
Um, yeah, there's so much here. I really recommend people check it out.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's dive into some more of the events at Unreal Fest, some of the sessions we saw. Right after, so one of the reasons why I also slept in a little bit from the opening keynote was I also had to run right to the labs because right after the opening session finished, I was giving a lab on diving deep with MetaHuman Animator, and it was fun for a couple reasons. First of which was, from what I heard, the opening session was running a little bit over, and that meant I'm trying to move my screen share over here. That meant that a lot of people were late, but I was told like keep the session under an hour. I was trying to get people to go through the full process of setting up their metahumans and doing a take and bringing it onto their computer. And what I found out pretty quick was I hadn't done the network settings correctly. I knew I wasn't going to be able to let people transfer MetaHuman Animator data over the Unreal Fest network, so I brought a nice little Nighthawk router. I tested it the day before during my tech check, and all the data was transferring fine. But I didn't realize that because of the way the ports work there, if everyone uses their default settings, they're all trying to go through the same port. So what happened in the middle of me teaching the session was I was like, okay, everyone, now transfer your MetaHuman Animator data to the computer.
Oh
And then I kept
no.
talking, and people were like, sir, it didn't work. And I'd be like, oh, you're just gonna go back, press this. And I kept talking. And then like I suddenly realized literally no one in the class was able to transfer their data.
Oh my
And I was like,
god.
oh, this is weird. And I figured out later, I was told by Cami, who's very smart and knows a lot about metahuman stuff, that yeah, everyone would have needed their own port. So what unfortunately ended up happening was I did create a project that had kind of every step of the way good to go in there. And what happened was I'd walk around the room and I saw that basically what everyone had to do was use my data, my face, the stuff that I'd already put in there to just create 30 different copies of me as a metahuman, which felt very, I don't know, self-indulgent when I really did want everyone to be able to create their own metahuman animator character. And the labs, yeah, just a comment on the labs in general. I thought they were amazing. They're the only thing that's not recorded at all at Unreal Fest, and all those sessions are like really great opportunities to dive into a particular topic. They sold out super fast. I told everyone treat them like T-Swift concert tickets, and indeed they were gone like right at 11 a.m. the day when they became available. But the other thing I said also held true, which is that if you showed up to a session a little early, you waited in line, you were able to get in. And so pretty much everyone who I know who really wanted to go to a particular lab session was able to participate. Jacob, did you go to any labs?
I did not make it to any. There were definitely a few that I wanted to go to. I probably actually would have loved to go to all of them, but yeah, they sold out too quickly. I can't remember what I was doing, but I didn't manage to jump on that. So yeah, I was bummed that I didn't get to make it to your session or a bunch of the other really interesting labs.
Yeah. The belle of the ball for the labs was one they were doing, I think, every day called the Unreal Engine Story Development Workshop. This was a 2-hour lab in Lab Room 4, and it had like 9 instructors. And I'll read what the description said, which was Unreal Engine includes many virtual production tools such as Virtual Camera, VCam, and Take Recorder, and can empower creatives to explore and produce their vision. This lab is 2 hours hands-on workshop focused on using Unreal Engine virtual production tools for visualizing story. So not only were people given the opportunity to use a virtual camera to go around and set everything up and record things, they were also using the Mocapi Sony mocap system to also get like live metahumans animated. And there were also incredible experts there, like the Coreys, Corey Strasburger from Kite and Lightning, and Corey Williams from A Million Things, OG YouTuber, in those sessions, kind of helping everyone understand how to make compelling, let's call it like VTuber content. So I didn't actually get to participate in these, but I got to hear through the grapevine what an amazingly useful 2-hour session that was for people who really wanted to get their feet wet using these tools and were given, the guidance of some of the best in the business to help them out.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that sounds awesome. One of the big losses from the layoffs is the scaling down of the fellowship,
Yeah.
right? So, for those who had never heard of this, the fellowship was a program where essentially they would pay you to go and learn Unreal Engine, which is insane,
It was
right?
like $10,000. It was a not insignificant amount to go learn Unreal Engine.
Yeah, so which is insane, right? Like for for most companies, that is just a pretty crazy proposition, and you could say, well, I can see why they ran out of money. Well, yes, and unfortunately, they had to scale down that program, which is a shame. There were a lot of people who loved it.
Yeah.
I only really heard really positive stuff about the fellowship. So, and it is sad to hear that that's maybe coming to an end. But I think it's an opportunity for a lot of people to step up and maybe do more of the hands-on lab kind of stuff that we get in Unreal Fest.
Yeah.
Certainly, we can both speak a little bit to instructing. You're going to take this torch and run with it. And if you want to give a quick plug, I approve of that.
Yeah, I did mention briefly in the last episode that I now have an authorized training center, the very first one in Manhattan, which is kind of mind blowing that no one has done that yet. And I also gave my first free course yesterday, which was very cool. It was to a nice crowd of about 40 people, and it was all free to start because I'm trying to give people a nice introduction to Unreal. And honestly, like, don't quote me on this, but I'll probably do the free course like once a month, intro to Unreal, just to kind of get people introduced. And then I'll probably only charge for the more advanced things. Today we're doing pixel streaming or the remote control API. But the thing that's most exciting to me about this is the courses that Jacob and I were involved with teaching and creating as part of the instructor-led training program within Epic. We weren't allowed to teach those by default to others. No one outside of who Epic was specifying as like a very special partner. But now as an authorized training center, all those courses are now available, and I can teach all of those, both the courses that I've helped create and the ones that others have. So it feels really good to be spreading the gospel on that. My talk at Unreal Fest last year, the OpenXR one, was very much intended to take the course that I'd made about OpenXR and make that a little bit more public. And now I don't need to adapt these things into Unreal Fest talks. I can just teach them the way I want to, which is lovely.
Yeah. I mean, I'm hoping that, like you said earlier, with a lot of folks who were, let go and now have 6 months to build an awesome project, I'm hoping that we see more people like say, hey, I know Unreal Engine. I bet people would like to learn about it and, make new communities as a result of it. I think that'd be a great outcome. And look, you're way ahead of them. You already got the first training center in Manhattan. So, I feel like you're in a good spot here.
Yeah, especially for hands-on training, because that's the only thing that gets a little difficult sometimes is when you're doing everything over Zoom to teach something like, virtual production or VR, where you really do want equipment and hardware. That's kind of hard. So I'm really excited about having some folks in New York City or bringing people to places like Zero Space or Pier 59 Studios, where you can be much more hands-on with this different equipment.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. All right, let's talk about a few sessions outside that. I got to a bunch of sessions, like I said. Like going into it, I think the topics I really wanted to hear more about were PCG, like the latest in Lumen and Nanite, because every release we get Lumen and Nanite improvements, and it's kind of a little bit difficult to follow exactly what it's capable of these days. PCG, Lumen and Nanite, and then a few other things like Substrate I wanted to hear more about. And, some of the new skeletal editor stuff, like
Skeletor editor would be a very cool new feature.
exactly. So I was excited to learn about all those, and kind of right off the bat, I was pretty. I managed to make it to a few really interesting talks. So one of the talks I went to was on optimizing games for Lumen and Nanite. So,
Nice.
coming from the world of having to optimize with LODs, HLODs, and draw calls and everything else, like it's a very different world. I learned a bunch of very interesting things, like for example, man, I can't talk tonight. For example, when you're using something like Lumen, everything gets drawn. Lumen and Nanite together, really. Everything gets drawn based on material. So it's not material and instance. It's really just material, and then it's subcategorized into a few different categories based on what type of material it is. And there's a whole new kind of optimization pattern that you have to follow for things like masked materials that really weren't in consideration. Translucency still takes a pretty big hit. Like there were a bunch of really interesting things that I felt like I walked away from that. Another big one is like don't have too many overlapping pieces of geometry. Like, yes, you can have a lot of geometry, but if you run into issues with overdraw, overdraw is still very much a thing. And that was certainly interesting. So, for example, nanite foliage, being careful that even if you're using nanite foliage, that it might be tempting to do things like use nanite with individual geometry for every strand of grass. And while it's possible, don't get me wrong, it's not necessarily practical, and can lead to issues. I remember watching Brian Karas's talk on nanite, where he showed the Pixar Moana scene that has individual geometry for every blade of grass. And I was thinking back to this, like, well, how come Pixar can pull it off? It's like, well, probably Pixar scenes are a little cleaner than most people who are kit bashing with nanite. And the intention, more or less, with nanite is to allow for kit bashing. So it's more about being careful and knowing kind of the consequences of your actions. I learned a bunch of nuance with hardware versus software, both for ray tracing and for there's a hardware and software pass for, man, the presenter would be very upset with me right now because this was a major point. So hardware versus software ray tracing, I learned that if you do software ray tracing with Lumen, it's far more scalable. You get much more performance, which is not usually what you expect when you hear software anything, because most time in software is slower. But clearly what they've done is they've turned software into their like scalable path. Hardware is for highest fidelity. That was very new to me. I don't feel like I walked into that. I would just always turn it on to hardware because, hey, I got the hardware, might as well use it. So yeah, I learned a bunch of stuff on that. PCG, I actually felt like most of the content that I saw felt pretty flat, like very interesting, very exciting. I didn't see anything that was that captivating. And then I guess for those other main topics like Substrate, I saw an amazing talk about Ferrari and using Substrate. I learned a lot about paint, and I saw some really incredible. They had a demo there that's not being shared publicly yet, where they had a Ferrari that was being rendered in real time, where they showed the side by side with the path tracer, the deferred path with Lumen and Nanite, and the reference photos. And my God, you could hardly tell the difference across the three. It was incredible. I'm very excited for this demo to come out, for people to check it out. And Substrate, I was very excited at kind of seeing it. It takes a while. It took me a while to intuit kind of how to piece it together, and I haven't even been hands-on with it yet. But pretty excited. And one of the big takeaways there is that Substrate is the replacement for the material system. It's not an and or an or. It's like this is where the material system is going.
Oh, I didn't know that. Huh.
Yeah, they were very explicit about that. Is like, we are getting rid of the old material system. Substrate is coming in. It is not going to be it is going to be a full replacement.
And I still don't quite understand how strata materials fit in all that. Do you know, Jacob?
Yeah. So so inside of substrate, each each layer, so to speak, is a slate. Now there was a kind of halfway point material system called strata that was designed for layering different materials, but it's very different than substrate, because what substrate does is it's has both a surface component and an actual like physical thickness, which has its own properties to it, and that's where a lot of the magic comes. So for example, with car paint, man, could I talk about car paint? With car paint, you might have a very reflective top coating, from a clear coat or something like that. And then and that might not have any thickness to it. It might be super thin and mostly reflective, but you might have a thick base coat that might have a very strong, color. And then the thickness has like metallic flakes in it, or has some thickness that scatters light in an interesting way. And all of these things, kind of lend to much better reproduction of the materials themselves, just because in the real world, materials have thickness, and again, I don't want to get in trouble with Unreal Engine or Ferrari for saying too much about this demo. It's coming publicly, but for example, they had like a tail light, where light was coming through the tail light, refracting through just the thickness of the plastic that wasn't defined in the geometry. It was defined in the material, and was casting a different colored caustic pattern on the side of the car, which is just incredible, right? Just you could not do that with the previous material system. I was watching the whole thing saying, wow, there would be no way to do this, or it would be extremely complicated and time consuming to figure out. So yes, very excited for it. We're moving away from the standard PBR approach, which trying to define everything with, is it metallic, is it rough, and a normal map is just not sufficient anymore. So very excited for this.
Thanks for that explanation.
Yeah. There was a lot that I got from that. Was just Ferrari was on the last day, but that was just the first day. There's just so much to talk about here.
So not to be a bit of a Debbie Downer, but I did ask my team members. I brought some employees from my company to Unreal Fest. And by the way, we had an Airbnb like a block from the conference center, which was great for bringing people over for like VR demos and stuff like that. Highly recommend other people and companies try that next time. But I asked them, because a bunch of them went to the talks, what did you think? And the general consensus was good content, very monotone, unenthusiastic delivery of most of that content. Did you see any of that?
Yeah, I ended up switching sessions a couple times where there's something that I was like, oh, I'll be interested in that. I got a few minutes in. I'm like, I don't know if this is really for me. And then I went, and there happened to just be, 6, 7 other sessions going on. So I just picked another one. And almost always after, kind of rerouting, I would find something I was interested in. One of my best surprises was I was going to, here, I guess I have 2 examples. The first one was I was going to a talk on PCG. I got in, and the presenter was just kind of moving a little too slow. I felt bad for him, because it actually felt like he might have been a replacement for someone who might have been fired, which is never an easy position to be in. But I left, and I said, oh, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to make Chris Murphy's talk this year.
Oh, sure.
So Chris Murphy, who's one of the evangelists for
senior evangelists.
Yeah, probably the most well-known evangelist, maybe one of the most well-known evangelists, based out of Australia. every year usually does some sort of like brain dump of everything he thinks is interesting in Unreal Engine that you might not know of. And really what that means is that you sit there for like 30 minutes, an hour saying, wow, I didn't know that. Wow, I didn't know that. Wow. It's like you spend the whole time saying, either hating yourself for, doing something in a very complicated way that you could have done in one click, or you're like, wow, I want to try all this stuff. But this year I made it, and he talked about a bunch of really interesting stuff that I had not heard about. He highlighted things like the virtual asset system. He highlighted, like I can't even repeat it. Again, he goes blazing fast, and he talks about so much. But it's always so impressive, and I really recommend going on YouTube and watching some of his talks because, yeah, he goes one after another with like important things that he thinks you should know about Unreal, and most of the time he's right. So really, I would recommend that. So that was one example. I got to go see Chris Murphy this year. And then another one was I was at a talk about there was a talk about Unreal Engine in the cloud, which was kind of relevant for the stuff I do day to day. And I got like 5 minutes into it. I was like, wow, this sucks. No offense to the speaker. I mean, I probably a lot of it was like I hear this stuff every day, so I'm not. I'm a little jaded to it, I guess. But I said, okay, I'm going to go find something else. And there happened to be a Hogwarts Legacy talk going on at the same time. And it was a talk on the narrative systems that they built for Hogwarts Legacy. And it was super, super cool. So they were showing off this timeline system that they'd built. The guy who was speaking, and I don't remember her name, so I apologize. Hopefully we can find this recording. He was showing off he was making a point that all narrative is, lives in this fourth dimension on a timeline. And so he had faced a lot of challenges in previous studios. He said, we're going to build our own system for this that's based on a relative timeline. So this is not even really a term I was familiar with. So you have an absolute timeline in editing and stuff like that, where you place everything inside of a fixed window. And every one of your tracks is on a timeline from frame 1 to frame whatever, right? Same with something like Sequencer inside of Unreal, right? Like you place everything on a specific frame number. But what they did is that they built a system that is all relative. So you would say, okay, this bit of dialogue, this animation, this story event is going to happen 20 frames after this other one. And so it was a really interesting thing that they built. And essentially what it allowed them to do is for some of the more open-ended story notes where like they wanted it to be very reactive, or they wanted players to feel like it was a more organic conversation, or they just had so much going on and they didn't want to do it all inside of Sequencer and event triggers and stuff like that. They were able to just kind of lay it all out on one timeline, which was very impressive from my perspective. Like everything from, animations, story beats, like being able to specify kind of long-term narrative, pieces. It was very, very interesting. They clearly built a lot of really cool tools for this project. For example, they had a custom widget, which was their own window that had their script for all of the scenes in Hogwarts Legacy. And they could click on the script and it would sync with their timeline and take you to the right frame that they were working on, so that like you could read the script and see where you were in the story, or click on the next part of the script and work on that line, like work on staging that phrase, which I thought was really, really cool. I actually made it to a talk after that with some of the tech leads about some of the stuff that they'd done for building the game in terms of like what tooling they'd built for testing and QA, and they built a bunch of really interesting stuff there. But it's maybe not as exciting for a podcast format, so I'll maybe skip that.
So I actually watched a fair bit of the Hogwarts Legacy talk on the live stream. I think I was like preparing for my talk on Wednesday and just wanted like something in the background, and I found it pretty interesting. If anyone else wants to check it out, it's in the Day One Unreal Fest Day One live stream. 5 hours and 9 minutes into it, and it is given by Eric Brown from WB Games Avalanche.
Yeah. Highly recommend. If you're like thinking about building narratives, I think this is a really interesting example.
Oh, and if you still have that public roadmap, that was one of the things that caught my eye on it actually, which the Hogwarts Legacy talk made me think of it, which is I believe they mention relative timelines or relative sequences or something like that inside
Dynamic
that feature.
sequencer, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
let me
So
read. I just controlled F this. I haven't read this, so we'll
go
discover
ahead,
this
go ahead.
together. Provides a set of features that enable and support dynamic user-defined operations of data. Condition track, set the active states of an animation track based off a condition. Yeah. Parameterized keyframes, change the value of a keyframe to a different value based on user-defined runtime logic. And subsequence play rate, dynamically change the play rate to selectively speed up or slow down subsequences for gameplay, artistic performance reasons. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely some of the DNA of that talk in here. I'll be very excited to see kind of where this goes.
Yeah, so that's really exciting. Okay, other things to note about the festival, the Sugar Mill Party. Oh, actually, I guess the Snoop Dogg talk was before that. But yeah, let's talk a little bit about some of the social side of everything. So there were the talks going on, there were the labs, there were exhibit booths, there were meals, and everything was catered. What struck you about the stuff going on outside of the core learning content, Jacob?
Side of the core learning content. Well, for one, I drank way too much beer.
I had like zero
Because
beer. I had nothing but like sugary cocktails.
yeah, well, that's the thing is all the mixers only had beer,
Mm,
which was for me a bit of a shame. But that's a side note. Outside of that, I mean, for me, and I know for you, like this conference, out of all the conferences that I go to during the year, is very much like a reunion with a
yeah.
lot of folks that I really enjoy catching up with and learning what they're doing, and I really enjoy seeing what people are doing with Unreal. Um, so yeah, every year it's exciting to see that. And this was no different. I would say outside of Unreal, one of the most exciting things that was to learn about was the UEFN ecosystem. Honestly,
Hmm.
I was very surprised to learn more about that. We made a mutual connection, JJ, who
Yeah.
I think will
Hey, JJ. Thanks for being a
we
listener.
yeah, well, we'll definitely have on the podcast in the future. We had an awesome conversation though about UEFN and that ecosystem and how it's developing. This sort of creator ecosystem that's coming out of that I think is really exciting, and lends towards the sort of accessibility of the tools that we use every day, but bringing that to a wider audience that can make use of them in very new ways. And so I think that's very exciting. Um, so I think that was one of my biggest takeaways. And anything for you, Alex?
Let me give a quick timeline of my social activities over the week, because again, this really was all about connecting with people for me. So arrived Saturday. Saturday night, went to see The Creator from Gareth Edwards with a bunch of people. Super cool. Sunday night, did the full Bourbon Street experience up and down. We kept saying like, we'll just do one more, and we were in like amazing jazz clubs and karaoke bars and piano bars, and I think might have consumed like 18 drinks. Fun fact about me, I have never I want to say like properly had a hangover in my life before, and I really thought this was going to be the night where it happened. I didn't have enough water, I didn't have enough food in my stomach. All the the red flags of like, you're going to have a rough morning tomorrow were there. And the next morning I woke up kind of dizzy, like a little dizzy. That's it. Felt totally fine. So I don't know. I have some weird superpower that allows me to drink
Very
an
jealous.
insane amount of alcohol and be totally fine. Then Monday night, Zero Space, my friends over in Brooklyn, they had a great party at their Airbnb. We brought over some VR headsets and tried to provide some light entertainment of that. Tuesday night, I went to the dinner from Hathora, which was really cool. They're an awesome like Unreal Engine multiplayer company. That's where I got to hang out with some really incredible UEFN creators, among other people as well, doing things in Unreal. The guy next to me, I saw everyone was ordering their drinks, and he ordered a Roy Rogers, and I was like, "Really?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm 20. I can't order anything except this." I said, "Good for you. You're amazing." And he told me about how his company started when he realized he was really good at Minecraft, and we wanted to create a competition where he could show off to people how good he was at Minecraft, and started to make a lot of money from that. And then he did something similar with Roblox, and then started to do the same thing with UEFN. And now he's 20 years old, being like, "Yeah, I can probably drop out of college now. I've got this like very successful company that's working across these different platforms. If one of those platforms fails, the other ones are still going to support them." So that was cool. And then where are we? That's Tuesday night. Then I went right from that to the influencer party. Did you catch this? It was over in like the La Nouvelle Ballroom.
There was an influencer party. That's very
Yeah,
funny.
it was unclear who was supposed to be at this. I think I decided in the end it was supposed to be for UEFN creators. I caught the very tail end of it. Got to say a quick hi to like Matt Workman and some really cool folks from Epic Games who I recognize, like Dean Reinhardt and stuff like that. But that was like just toward the end of it. I watched Matt Workman's vlog, by the way, which is a great visual recap of everything at Unreal Fest. And I didn't feel too bad missing it, because he mentions in there that it was like way too loud. Like the music was so loud during that party, you couldn't really talk to anyone. And I'm here not necessarily to listen to loud music, but to actually talk to people. So was okay with that. And then we arrive at Wednesday, and Wednesday was like the big giant party at the Sugar Mill. But yes, what was right before the Sugar Mill, Jacob?
Right before the Sugar Mill, was that Snoop Dogg or
That was Snoop Dogg, yeah.
Okay, yeah, that was Snoop Dogg. All right, so
The very firesidey, smoky chat.
yeah, so we no one really knew what the Snoop Dogg talk was going to be. They didn't preface it. I thought for sure it was going to be like a 30-minute ad for NFTs or something, right? Like,
Sure.
I did not have high hopes for it. But all in all, he got up there, and I walked away being like, "Wow, that was pretty cool."
It was a good conversation.
I said this to Alex, is like, Snoop Dogg can make absolutely anything sound cool.
Yeah.
Like he was saying some things that if it came out of my mouth would sound idiotic. But he just makes sound so cool. And so he was talking about he and his son were there, talking about how they're getting more involved in games and content, and they're building a game studio, and they're using UEFN. They're building, short films, and it actually ended up being very interesting. So you were there, right?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah. That was literally the only thing that I actually sat in a chair to watch, because I was curious what's going to happen. I thought it was cool, the father son dynamic as well, and it was a little bit sad when Bill Clifford, who was doing the interview, was like, "Oh, so you guys play video games together?" And Snoop Dogg kind of looks like a little despondent and says like, "Nah, he don't want to play with me no more." Like,
Yeah,
my son, he's
really
grown up. He doesn't want to spend time with his dad.
sad, but it was actually ended up being a conversation that was at least fun to listen to, right? Like,
Yeah.
just because if Snoop Dogg said it, it sounded cool. But yeah, I think it was cool, and all in all, I didn't walk away feeling like I just watched a huge ad, even though it was. So that was pretty cool.
Last year on the podcast, I covered Meta Connect pretty well, because there were the announcements about the Quest Pro and all that. I don't think I've said anything about Meta Connect this year, because not that much, other than, hey, a Quest 3 and legs are on their way and stuff like that, and the Unreal Engine plugin is still lagging way behind the Unity plugin. But Snoop Dogg actually was a pretty big part of Meta Connect this year, because such a big part of it was Facebook talking about their AI initiatives, and how they really think you're going to love it when Snoop Dogg can be your AI dungeon master. So, there was a lot of that talk and a lot of announcements in that vein.
I mean, yeah, sure. Sure. Yeah, I actually didn't. I didn't watch really any of Meta Connect, so I have no comments on it. But
Yeah. That's fine. So I was really excited to go to the Sugar Mill stuff because last year I completely missed the parade, the big
Yeah.
Wednesday night event, so to speak, because I had been on the phone with a client for most of Unreal Fest last year. I missed a lot of it, and then I had to skip the parade because I had to get my talk ready. I hadn't really worked on it at all, so I got out of the last thing I was doing right before the parade started, went back to my hotel, and then worked like right until 3 a.m. until I felt like my talk was in a reasonable place. Remember, it was like an hour and 45 minutes long, so there was a lot of
Yeah.
material to cover. And then I passed out and woke up and, went and gave it. So I definitely felt like I missed out on the big social event last year. And I was fully intending, by the way, Jacob, to stay at the Sugar Mill as late as that would go and to explore all the carnival and dancing and everything. But then someone had to invite me to a really cool thing
Yeah.
off campus,
Well,
and I had to go to that.
Well, you gotta see some jazz when you're in New Orleans, right?
Yeah.
And up to that point, I hadn't been to any jazz, and for me, that's like an empty hole in my heart. I can't live
Yeah.
with that. So yeah, I mean, the party was awesome. It was a carnival theme. Alex spent a good amount of time trying to win some stuffed animals.
I won my
Um,
first one very, very quickly,
yeah,
and then wanted to get the second one because I have two kids. Jacob had a very clever strategy to try to help me win, which didn't work, and then we gave up. And then I remembered that one of the swag bag items was actually a stuffed bumblebee, so my kids were totally fine.
but it was cool. I mean, it was a much larger venue. Maybe not much larger. It was larger. And
Did you
it
try
was.
the tater tots?
I did try the tater tots. Tater tots were great. Popcorn was good. A lot of fun games. It was a good time, all in all. It was a really good time.
Ooh,
And it was right across the street, so it was
yeah,
like
real
as simple
easy.
as it could be.
Some of my most enjoyable conversations during the party were actually with some of the mods from the Unreal Slackers channel, which I think is now called Unreal Source, which was neat because that's a channel that I only pop into here and there, and Discord isn't generally my friend, but they're super awesome, amazing mods, amazing people, and they actually did a nice job of kind of helping me feel less afraid or less anxious or bothered by Discord, and I really appreciated that. They took the time to be like, well, here's how to address all of your concerns about too many notifications and too many channels and mentions and all that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and there's a bunch of those communities that I feel like I don't even touch. And maybe I should. Maybe I should. Yeah, I think there were a lot of interesting conversations that came out of that, but we had to make it to jazz.
Yeah, we did.
So we shipped it over to Frenchman Street and spent the rest of the night there. Ran into some folks along the way, and what can I say? It was a good time.
What Jacob, the jazz club we went to, because we went to a couple. The first one we went to, was there a special guest of any
Oh yeah,
sorts?
well yeah. I mean, I don't know if this is relevant for the Unreal Engine podcast, but the unofficial Unreal Engine podcast. Sorry.
We can talk about
But
anything.
yeah, I mean, so one of my favorite jazz clubs on Frenchman Street is Snug Harbor, which is like more of a classic jazz joint, more similar to what you get in New York, where you sit down and really talented musicians, they play for you. And there was a special guest, which was a guitarist, Chris King, that I really love. And I was total surprise, but I had a great time. I have a signed book to show for it right here.
Oh yeah, where is it?
Look at this. Got a signed book. I'm not sure
Ooh.
that's going to come to the
Oh,
green
it's
screen,
very
but you
green
get the
screen.
idea. Um, and yeah, it was a great time. Then when you go across the street to Spotted Cat, and you just party the rest, and it was a great time.
Yeah, yeah. But there was a lot of karaoke that night. There are a lot of karaoke videos from me and others,
Oh,
and
nice.
anyone who wants to see those, just message me, and I'm happy to share. It's all public domain.
Yeah, you were out much later than I was.
Yeah. I did stay until the karaoke bar closed, which I think was about 3 a.m. Oh, and quick note about that. So Wednesday morning, I gave my talk, and it was me and Jose Uribe from PureBlink and Neil Griffiths from D-Box, and we were talking about our Four Seasons project. And a funny thing happened where the three of us had done our rehearsal, and everything went according to plan. Neil was talking for about 10 minutes, Jose 15 minutes, and me 15 minutes. But then Luthia, who was kind of running our room, told us right before we went on stage to give our talk to a very nicely packed room. Thank you to anyone who came out to see us, that we were right before lunch. And that meant that we didn't need to be like super strict in our 50-minute time slot. We could relax a little bit. And we thought, oh, great, cool. So Neil gets up, does his 10 minutes, still like a tight 10 minutes. And then Jose gets up and he starts to become a little more loquacious. He's looking at his slides and thinking about like, oh, I could also talk about this and talk about this. And 15 minutes go by, 20 minutes go by. I'm looking at the timer. He's starting to notice the timer. 30 minutes go by. And by the time Jose hands off to me, the timer says 4 minutes left. And, you know, I was thinking like, 15 minutes, and 15 minutes is me talking at kind of my usual comfortable rate. And I'm thinking like, I could hold people here, but people are hungry. They want to go to lunch. So what I basically do is I stand up, and when it's my turn to talk, I say, okay, everyone, thank you so much for coming to this. I'm going to talk really fast, and I'm so sorry to everyone in the room. This is mostly going to be for the people who watch the replay on YouTube. I just recommend everyone play this back at about 0.25x speed, and here we go. And I was off to the races and cleared through that content very, very fast. But I think it went over well. I had some great conversations afterwards with people who stuck around, folks from NASA and Sony and some great architecture firms. And I feel like we gave off the desired effect of how complicated of a project this has been over the last year. And then the reason I bring this up is because at karaoke later that night, I was like, you know, when I take my kids to Taekwondo, they love Eye of the Tiger from Survivor, from Rocky. And so I've gotten very good at singing that song. It's like a good song in my range. I can really belt out. And so I'd signed up for that in karaoke. And then Ryan Knull, who had given the Hillside sample talk with Carlos Cristerna, both of them used to be from Neoscape. Now Carlos works at Epic Games. But Ryan had seen the talk, and he's like, no. You're not going to sing a song. You need to do something with some speed. And I was like, well, I'm not going to rap. He's like, do you know 1 Week by the Bare Naked Ladies? And I was like, I mean, not since I was like 13 years old, but kind of. And so he convinced me to change my thing to that, which was fine. I felt bad though, because there were some other people who were coming on stage to do karaoke with me, and they're like, oh, we don't know that song. So I did like, 80% job, like getting through everything and rushing through Chickadee China, the Chinese chicken. You have a drumstick and your brain stops sticking, watching X-Files and the lights on, with Dalamay Sun, and the Smoking Ones in this one, etc. And they were like totally lost, but being good sports about the whole thing. So yeah, it was a very fun night of karaoke.
Nice, very nice. Yeah, it's. I have to imagine that was quite. Did you tell them to listen to it back at quarter speed, just in case?
I should have. Yeah, that would have been a nice callback.
Yeah. Okay. So that's Wednesday. I got to a bunch of such a blur now. I awesome talks. I'm sure. I can't remember. I have my schedule up, but yeah. I mean, awesome sessions Wednesday. Snoop Dogg. What else is there to say?
Thursday felt a little bit weird. Like I'm curious, because maybe I wasn't thinking enough about what time it was all ending on Thursday. But kind of similar to last year, there's not like a closing session. There's not really a goodbye. It's like there's the last batch of like 16 talks, and then it's just kind of over. And I think a lot of people felt a little like, oh, like, are we being kicked out? Like, how do we find all the people we want to say goodbye to? Some people were leaving at like, noon, and then later throughout the day. So a lot of folks were just kind of trying to figure out like, how do they put a button on this really cool event? Did you kind of feel that too?
Yeah, I think the assumption with the last day of any conference is that half the people are going to go home. I don't think that was the case here. I think actually a lot of people stayed. And like there were some awesome sessions on Thursday, like that Ferrari talk, which was the very last session of the whole thing.
Oh, really?
Yeah, which is incredible. I don't know why anyone would schedule that session for the end, but they did, and it was great. It was a packed room, like no trouble with attendance. So yeah, I should say also on Wednesday, the talk from TensorWorks was really awesome. Yeah. Talking about pixel streaming, editor streaming. They had the first example that I've seen of a side-by-side of Windows and Linux rendering Loon and Nanite. They had an awesome video that they had made, with scrubbing between the two to see, hey, here's the difference. And I think you could have easily walked away from that saying, "Oh, well, Linux isn't quite there yet." Well, but you could equally walk away saying, "Wow, it's really almost there." Like it's there's not a whole lot missing. And for the majority of people who are working with pixel streaming, like, would you look at that and say, "Man, that's worth 30% more money," in
Yeah.
practical terms, because that's what it is? Like, no, I don't think you would. So some really cool stuff there. Editor streaming, I continue to be very excited about. I could go on a whole rant there. I won't.
Mm.
But yeah, it was an awesome talk. We need to have the TensorWorks folks in the podcast at some point.
Yeah, they're great.
That's well overdue. But we'll make that happen at some point.
Should we mention anything about what we did with the Tensor folks that evening?
The Tensor folks. I'm gonna. The funny thing is, shout out to Tequila Works, whoever.
Oh yes.
We were at the party, and the TensorWorks, and TensorWorks is a bit of a funny name. I'll let them tell the story when they're on the podcast, but they don't do anything with AI, and they get confused all the time for an AI company. But a few folks walked up to them wearing Tequila Works shirts, which was like the funniest thing ever in my head. Oh my God, you guys need Tequila Works shirts. Anyways, what was even the question? I totally got off.
I said, should we say anything about what we did Thursday evening with TensorWorks?
Oh yeah. So, and kind of, I feel like making this a tradition, but certainly last year, kind of organized a bit of a dinner to go to Commander's Palace, which is an awesome restaurant in New Orleans. It's like a very well-established, classic New Orleans like sit-down dinner. It's if you Google like best restaurants in New Orleans, it's usually on the list. And it was an awesome time. I mean, it's always great. They take really good care of you. The food's always great. And the company's even better.
Yeah. It was really fantastic. And major shout out to Jacob, who this was very much his treat. He did the reservation ahead of time and made great recommendations for what we should get. I also got very excited because you guys did it last year, and I could see how excited Sarah from TensorWorks in particular was about like the desserts. So that built up the anticipation for me, and everything delivered. It was really a thrilling culinary experience.
It's always a fun time, and you can always find like fancier restaurants with smaller portions, and it's more artistic experience. But like I really think it's that kind of place where you sit down, you feel both at home, like you have a really talented chef cooking for you in your like colonial Georgian mansion in the middle of the South. It's really a for folks like us who enjoy the immersion of it. I think there's a lot there.
Yeah, and it felt very authentically New Orleans. Like it felt like the kind of restaurant that wouldn't feel the same if it was transplanted to New York City.
Definitely not. I drank my fair share of Sazeracs too. So just to
that was definitely your drink of the week. Yeah.
Oh, it's a good drink. I try to make it here, but I haven't quite stomached the idea of trying to purchase absinthe, which for those who don't know what this is like a cocktail podcast now. A Sazerac, it's like an old fashioned, but you wash the glass with absinthe first, and it kind of gives it this like fun floral kind of interesting taste, which I really enjoy. So, anyways, this is a great sidetrack. So like, what are your takeaways from Unreal Fest?
First, my takeaway is anyone who's not watching our video feed is missing out on my cat Zoe over here.
Your cat's been there for a while. I haven't said it. I looked behind me because I thought it was one of my cats.
It's like perfectly placed in the green screen to feel like it's like a very tiny cat on our virtual table here. And then my other cat, one of my other cats is over here, and I want to like grab them and move them over, but that feels too staged. It's okay. Nice little treat for anyone who's actually watching the YouTube channel. My takeaway is the Unreal Engine community is an incredibly special community, and I love spending time with these people. I wanted to show like a quick flyby of my slides, but it was kind of misbehaving. I'm going to try one more time because you can just see like how happy we all are to be hanging out together. Oh, this looks okay. Overlay fade in. Right. So here's like, my quick flyby of like a bunch of the Unreal Engine stuff and food and people. and we were all just having a blast, man. And it's not only that like I want to talk to all these people about Unreal Engine. I also just want to hang out with them and spend time with them because these are the kinds of people, personality wise, value wise, etc., that are just really, really lovely. Here's that 20-year-old founder with his Roy Rogers, by the way, fantastic. John McInnes, I'm so glad I got to hang out with. He has the best stories in the world about the film industry in LA, and he's making a movie in Unreal Engine right now that everyone should check out. And I ran into an old, not employee, but an old independent contractor of mine. His name's Russell Morgan. Really incredible, sweet guy who got me started with like GitHub years ago. Did a lot of work for Agile Lens, and then he got hired by Supernatural, which of course was acquired by Meta. So now he's a full Meta employee. And I was literally just standing behind him in line at the in the food line at lunch, and was like, "What are you doing here?" And there were like 5 things like that. I also sat next to a gentleman who I probably whizzed by really quick, this guy, who is an instructor on Udemy, and I had actually bought his course. And I was asking him like, "Hey, what do you do?"
Yeah, I
He's
recognize
like, "Oh, I do a
that
lot of
guy.
Unreal Engine stuff." You recognize him?
When you said Udemy, I recognized him.
Yeah. So the funny thing was, and I'm honestly not on Udemy that much, but he's like, "Oh, I do things on Udemy," and I was like, "Oh, I'll look you up." And I opened up the Udemy app on my phone, and literally the course pulled up. He was like, "That's one of my courses," which was very cool. So that was great. Also, this was kind of Unreal Fest in a nutshell to me. Oh, we're getting artifacts. It's my Apple Watch saying it looks like you're trying to work out because the conference center was so full with all the running back and forth. This was one of the best Unreal mixed reality experiences I've ever seen. This was using the Vario XR3.
Oh, I didn't get to see this.
Come on,
This looks
Screencast.
awesome.
Yeah, I literally could not tell when I was inside the Unreal Engine experience where the I'm making it worse, where the green screen started and where like the steering wheel and the seat were. It felt totally natural. My hands were in there. The touch screen was like a really cool way to really feel like I was controlling the car in different ways. This was the best swag at Unreal Fest. This was a onesie, a big giant hoodie. This was a great present for my wife to, say thank
Did
you
she
for
like it?
watching the kids for the entire week I was gone.
Did she like it?
Sorry,
though?
what'd you say? Yeah, she loves it. It's great. It's a really comfy giant hoodie that will keep you warm in the winter. Greg's amazing. There's Snoop Dogg. Here's the Fest party. There's JJ. Here's the Coreys. Here's a gentleman from Cosm who I was really excited to talk to. Here's Ed and Jackie who run CG Pro, which is an amazing training company I've worked with in the past. Here's oh my goodness, why am I forgetting the company Mitaverse? There's Jamie Lopez from Mitaverse. This picture makes me really happy. Corey Williams took this picture, but Corey Williams, Corey Strasberger, Matt Workman, and me, just a cool group of dudes. Here's some of the amazing jazz we saw. Here's karaoke, more jazz. Let's see. Lots of karaoke. Here's some of the demos we were giving at our Airbnb using Rococo live single camera capture, where you could just move around and see that mocap data translating live. And then a little more. This was our great talk with JJ and one of her employees. Here's Gaspard from Mira. Here's Victor Brodin on his amazing like little wheelie thing, which he looked so happy driving around on. This thing was heavy though. I was like, "Can you do like a wheelie on that or like a 180?" And he's like, "No, this thing's like 50 pounds." There's Carlos and Ryan right before we went out to our meal. There's Jacob and Victor Brodin showing how tired he was because he went right from MetaConnect to this. Stephen Phillips, such an amazing crew of people. Diana Derry Wachter, who's in the education department, we flew over and ended up flying back together. So that was really cool. And last but not least, I think Ryan Manning took this picture.
Really?
But what a lovely picture of you and I, Jacob, looking up at the sky. It just begs for a caption contest.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So it was a wonderful event. I can't wait to do it all again next year. And and also what a cool pin. The swag bag like left a little something to be desired, but this was really cool.
That was really cool. Do you want to tell people what you're showing and what it is?
It is the Dragon, which is something that still remains in Unreal Engine, and it's been there since the very first version. I should know the history more. Maybe you know it off the top of your head. I'm just typing in the word Dragon, Unreal Engine.
I was under the impression it was a
Dragon
raptor,
characters.
personally.
Oh, is it a raptor? I always thought it was a dragon.
Believe
Oh.
it was part of It was part of the early. Oh man, now we're gonna get absolutely roasted
It is
for.
embarrassing. We should definitely know this.
Yeah. Okay. Wait. I got it. Hold on. It's the icon for billboard component. All
Yeah,
right.
but why?
And there's people saying it's a dragon thingy. Okay. Hold on. We gotta get to the bottom of this.
Here we go. It's off topic. Off topic in a forum thread.
We're in the
Hold on,
same
hold on.
place. We're in the same place.
Oh, we're in the same place.
This icon dates back to 1995, where it was the default actor icon in Unreal Engine 1. It was created by Dan Cook. Why is it a dragon's head? Well, that's another story that goes back to early days, where the game Unreal rose from combining James Schmaltz's early 3D prototype work featuring a dragon flying over 3D terrain with the work creating the 3D editing tool for the project, which later became Unreal Engine. At that point, a dragon was the canonical character representing the game, hence the dragon head icon. And for the record, that's Tim Sweeney in the forum that I just ran into.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'll send this link to you, Alex. You'll find
That's
this actually
hilarious.
pretty fascinating. Tim
Wow.
Sweeney jumped in on this this forum post, so I feel like that's a pretty definitive telling. So.
That's hilarious. Wow. Cool.
But for us,
like
we've been used to seeing that icon a lot. We just can't quite pinpoint because it's so omnipresent in our heads. Yeah. Very.
All right. Well,
very fascinating.
Jacob, do you have any closing thoughts on Unreal Fest? Anything you'd would do differently next year?
My closing thoughts are: I think it's exciting to see the community grow. I am hoping that next year we bounce back from a bit of this, from some of the growth that kind of made things challenging for Epic, and we continue to see the development that we are seeing in the engine. There's so much that's so close that will make the usability and the accessibility of the engine so powerful. I think we're really close to that hitting a critical mass for a lot of different use cases, where I think you will continue to see way more TV and film and animation and UEFN, all these different mediums that are utilizing in a much more meaningful way, because it's really getting to that point. So I'm really excited for that. I'm hoping next year the show reel is unreal. Funny. And it's I'm assuming the conference will continue to grow.
Yeah. Next year we'll have 12-year-olds at the conference.
Yeah, you
we'll
never
just
know.
keep youngering down.
But that's my takeaway, is that the accessibility and so many of the features that are both from a professional sense, like the things you need to build big projects, as well as the things that you need if you're an independent creator. Like, there's so much breadth there, and it's getting so mature that I really think it's an exciting time to get involved in Unreal, even if it doesn't seem like that on the surface. Given the recent events, I really do think it's an exciting time. Just there's a lot to play with, and there's a lot that you can make with it. So I'm very excited to see what happens.
Yeah. And by the way, for anyone who is feeling like they missed out and everything, all the sessions are going to be, well, sorry, not every single one. Most of the sessions will be available soon. I think I was told by the end of the year, all of them will be uploaded. It'll be hopefully more of a trickle than like a dead drop of 10 sessions at a time, like happened last year. But if you look at the live streams at unrealengine.com/events/unreal-fest-2023, there's 40 sessions that are just part of the 3-day live stream there. So they're all listed on the page. And they're a lot of good sessions that I will probably be watching at 2x speed, because to me the whole world talks too slowly. But
Man, I must talk really slow for you. You never mentioned that.
No, you're great. You have a very soothing voice, Jacob.
I appreciate that. My fiance tells me that I talk too slow and I don't finish my sentences. So I apologize. I didn't mean to upset any of our listeners or you, Alex.
Ah, it's okay. I'm not upset. Although I do want you to try to guess how long this episode's been.
See, the thing is, I even look at the time. I'm gonna guess this has been an hour 35 minutes.
Ooh, oh, that's very good. You might be spot on actually, because we did have a little moment.
Check
early
your
on in the
audio.
episode where
Check
we
your
had to
audio.
clip something.
What's it at?
Yeah, so my Audacity, because I'm recording this on a separate audio track, is at 1 hour and 37
Wow.
minutes. But I feel like when I actually hit record, it probably was about 2 minutes
Look at
of
that.
other stuff. So this is almost definitely your best guess yet. Well done.
Right on the money. It's an hour 20. Let's just be real.
Yeah.
You know, it's always an hour 20 at the end of the day. Well, thank you guys if you've listened up to this point. You know, this was a special episode recapping Unreal Fest. I think we have a lot of ideas coming out of this about how we can, continue to bring some content to you guys on this podcast. I'm excited for a few of the ideas that came out of it. And if you have any suggestions for things that you'd like us to do with the podcast, different things you'd like us to talk about, guests that you'd like us to have on, please let us know in the comments or wherever it is you live. Reach out to us. And in the meantime, make sure that you like, subscribe, rate, comment, all those things. We'll catch you on the next podcast.
And if you really enjoyed hearing us talk about Unreal Fest, listen to our episode from last year where we also recapped Unreal Fest.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day and goodbye.